Hello, Ka-Edu! Here is Module 2 for building and enhancing new literacies across curriculum. For this episode, we'll discuss on cultural and multicultural literacies as well as the issues in teaching and learning multicultural literacy in the Philippines. As a future 21st century teacher, you must be familiar with the new literacies, or the new areas of learning that you have to emphasize and prioritize when handling teaching and learning activities. What is cultural literacy? A term coined by Hirsch, it refers to the ability to understand the signs and symbols of a given culture and being able to participate in its activities and customs as opposed to simply being a passive and outside observer. It is culture specific, but it is not limited to national cultures, contrary to what many people assume. The culture of one workplace can be very different from another, just as culture of a particular school can differ widely from another school nearby. It is also a result of globalization and the increased opportunities it brings, the need to develop new cultural literacies. What about the cultural literacy in the Philippines? The National Commission for Culture and Arts is the government body tasked with the documentation, preservation, and dissemination of Philippine culture, both locally and abroad. As a result of Republic Act 10066, PCEP has been designated as the body, together with the Department of Education, tasked to formulate the cultural heritage education programs both local and overseas Filipinos, that are to be an integral part of Philippine education in all its aspects. What are the challenges of cultural literacy in the Philippines? Among these challenges include adapting to a new culture, as it is difficult to abandon certain cultural characteristics to imbibe new ones. Amor propio, or the love for oneself, is technically bringing how one sees oneself during encounters or circumstances. Social propriety, or hiya, with the intense need to conform to what the society dictates or qualifies. Filipino time, or the traditional time management when one oversees and exceeds planned schedules, and times is flexible and high context of communicators, or the trait of always saying yes when one means no, and vice versa, as there is a need to suppress to what one really wants to convey, like doing another and saying otherwise. What is multicultural literacy? As a result of globalization, multicultural literacy is a set of skills and knowledge which depends on the context to which it is discussed. In foreign countries like America, Europe, and other parts of the world, it has a strong foundation on the identification of polyethnic origin of knowledge and of intercultural communication competence, cited from Ducey, Missetti, and Steinbach, as a composite of skills, abilities, attitudes, personality patterns, etc., necessary for clear and productive communication with cultures other than our own. The emergence of multiculturalism. Decades of continuous struggles starting from 1930s to the early 1990s showed the indispensable progress on the role of multiculturalism in the country and also in the world. With the amendments following the spheres of cultural diversity, inclusive education, social justice, and equity, the 21st century has given a toll of multicultural literacy in schools and its structures. Theories of multiculturalism. There are two theories of multiculturalism. The first one is the melting pot theory, which refers to setting aside temporarily or abandoning permanently certain characteristics to fit into a new group, and the second one is salad bowl theory, which refers to imbibing new characteristics to be one with the group, but retaining still some cultural characteristics to protect one's identity. Two of the proponents for this include Banks and Boat on social justice, equity, and diversity. Important features of multicultural literacy. Ethnocentrism versus cultural relativism. Ethnocentrism involves looking at another culture from the perspective of one's own culture, while cultural relativism involves looking at another culture by its own perspective instead of one's own culture. New ways of thinking, ideals, and principles which normally happen due to the exposure to various cultures, beliefs, traditions, and identities. Promotion of diversity, equity, and peace as a result of a close interaction from various viewpoints and standpoints grounded on one understanding. Dimensions of multicultural literacy. Among these dimensions include content integration, knowledge based from across literacies and curriculum, knowledge construction process, what one perceives as a result of accumulated knowledge, prejudice reduction, viewing a culture from the standpoint objectively, and equity pedagogy, ability to inject strategies or ways with consideration on whom we teach, what we teach, and how we teach. Globalization is the process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments worldwide. In the Philippine educational system, it was emphasized by the acquirement of 21st century skills and competencies, as well as the promulgation of laws encompassing free tertiary education, digital literacies, mother tongue-based instruction, and indigenous peoples' culture, among others. Issues in teaching and learning multicultural literacy in the Philippines. A number of issues surround the teaching and learning of multicultural literacy in the Philippines. Among them includes the following: conflicting requirements on peace. How one views world peace is totally different from context to where and when it was brought about or discussed. Nationalistic and regionalist pushback. In the event of ethno-linguistic groups, one assumes that its own culture is above or is inferior over others. Learn about other cultures. How one sees himself from or against other cultures generally affect the kind of respect and treatment he or she is most likely to give. Questions? Please check our virtual classroom for the learning task. Keep posted for the next episodes. See you, Ka-Edu!